You've probably seen the movie, right? The Oscar-winning one where a super determined law clerk takes on this corporate behemoth and scores a huge win for a small town. But, the real story of Hinckley, California and its fight against Pacific Gas and Electric, well, it's way more complicated than the Hollywood version. So, today, we're going to peel back the layers of this landmark case. This quote from Erin Brockovich herself, it just cuts right to the heart of it. This was never just about some contaminated water in a report. It was about real people, real lives being absolutely devastated, and the incredible uphill battle to hold a truly powerful company accountable. So the case ends with this record-shattering check. And you'd think, okay, story's over, they won. But for the people of Hinckley, the story didn't end there at all. In fact, in a lot of ways, the real struggle was just getting started. All right, so to really get what happened after the trial, we first have to understand the sheer scale of what happened before. So let's go back and set the scene in this small community, Hinckley, California. Okay, check out this timeline. This whole thing unfolds over decades. PG&E starts using this chemical all the way back in 1952. Then, by 1965, get this, their own internal records show they were worried about it getting into the groundwater. But it took them until 1987 to officially tell the state, and another 6 years before that first lawsuit was even filed. 370 million gallons. Just try to wrap your head around that number. That's the estimated amount of contaminated wastewater that just seeped into the ground from these unlined ponds, poisoning the very aquifer that an entire community depended on for everything. So what is this stuff exactly? Hexavalent chromium, or chromium-6. PG&E was using it to stop their cooling towers from rusting. The problem? It's also a known carcinogen. The entire case for the plaintiffs was built on this devastating link between drinking this chemical day after day and the wave of cancers and other horrible illnesses that were sweeping through Hinckley. Now, as the case started to snowball, we're talking over 600 plaintiffs eventually joining in, a really critical decision was made. And this decision changed everything that came next. The battle basically moved out of a public courtroom and into the shadows. And this right here shows you the huge choice the legal teams were facing. You go to a public trial, everything is out in the open. A jury of regular people hears the story, and they could award just massive, totally unpredictable damages. But PG&E, they were looking at a 5-year delay to even get to trial and some pretty damning evidence. So they pushed hard for private arbitration. And that meant everything was confidential, no jury, and this is the key, a pre-agreed cap on how much they'd have to pay. And this quote, it just shows you the human cost of that strategic move. The very people whose lives were at the absolute center of this case started to feel shut out of their own fight. Justice was being hammered out behind closed doors, and they were stuck at home, just waiting for letters from their lawyers to find out what was happening to their own futures. Now, behind those closed doors, the defense team wasn't just arguing about the law. Nope. They were running this incredibly sophisticated campaign to basically control the science itself. So this was the lineup for Team PG&E. You had the company, of course. You had their powerhouse law firm, Latham & Watkins. And then you had this key third player, a scientific consulting firm called Camresk. And their role would end up becoming a massive point of contention. Wow. Okay, this is a total bombshell right from the court depositions. There was this scientific paper by a researcher, a Dr. Zhang, that was relevant to the health effects of chromium. And it turns out it was being influenced by Camresk. And as this testimony from a Camresk scientist shows, this was happening while his firm was an active, paid consultant to PG&E during the litigation. So let's just break that down, because this is absolutely critical. PG&E, through its lawyers, was paying for and authorizing its own consultants to influence the scientific literature that could then be used in its own defense. You see, this wasn't just about arguing the facts anymore. It was about manufacturing doubt. By shaping the science, they could create just enough uncertainty about the link between chromium-6 and all these illnesses to maybe drive down the final settlement amount. And that brings us to the outcome of the case. On the surface, it looked like this massive, historic victory for the people of Hinckley. But the reality is, it left behind a legacy that is just deeply complicated and, honestly, pretty painful. And here's the number that made all the headlines: $333 million. At the time, it was the single largest settlement of its kind in U.S. history. On paper, it looks like a total knockout victory. But here's the question we have to ask. Was it really justice? I mean, money doesn't always fix things, right? Did this historic payout actually heal the community? Did it actually solve the problem? To really understand what happened, we need to bring in this idea called slow violence. It's not like an earthquake or a sudden disaster. It's this quiet, delayed, drawn-out destruction of a place and its people that happens over years and years, usually long after the news cameras have packed up and gone home. And this is what that slow violence actually looked like in Hinckley. The settlement check, it didn't stop the toxic plume in the ground from continuing to spread, which meant more lawsuits were needed later on. The money itself caused arguments and delays, and as PG&E started buying up properties as part of the cleanup, the town just began to wither away. The school closed, then the market, then the post office. The community of Hinckley, it just sort of vanished. Ultimately, I think the Hinckley case teaches us a really powerful lesson. A big lawsuit, a huge settlement, it can feel like the end of the story. But as this researcher concludes, it was really just a short-term fix for a very, very long-term poison. The real fight for lasting environmental justice, well, that's a battle that often continues long after the lawyers have gone home. This is for entertainment and educational purposes only. This is not legal advice.